Hello, dear friends. Today, I want to share with you a powerful and inspiring true story, a story about struggle, frustration, hope, and finally, success. This is the journey of someone who tried with all their heart to learn English, but faced many challenges along the way. Maybe you've also felt stuck while trying to learn a language or master a new skill. Maybe you've looked at others and thought, why is it so easy for them and so hard for me? But this story shows us something important. No matter how difficult the road may be, with determination and belief in yourself, you can achieve anything. This isn't just a story about learning English. It's a story about personal growth, overcoming fear, and becoming a stronger, more confident version of yourself. So if you're on a learning journey right now, or you're searching for a little motivation to keep going, stay with us until the end. This story might just change the way you see your own progress. Let's dive into this emotional and powerful journey together. My struggle to learn English. It was a rainy day when I first decided to take my English learning seriously. I had always known the importance of English in today's world, but something about that rainy afternoon made me realize just how much I had been missing out. I was sitting in my room, feeling frustrated and stuck. I had been trying to learn English for years, but no matter how many times I opened a book, listened to a podcast, or watched a movie with subtitles, I never seemed to improve. English always felt like a mountain I could never climb. I remember the first time I ever tried to speak in English. I was in school, and the teacher asked us to introduce ourselves in English. My heart raced as I stood up in front of the class, my hands shaking, trying to form a sentence. I stumbled over my words, and the room fell silent. I could hear the whispers of my classmates, and I wanted to disappear. I was embarrassed, and that moment stayed with me for a long time. From then on, I started avoiding English whenever I could. But that rainy day, something changed. I realized that my fear of making mistakes had been holding me back all these years. I had been so worried about not speaking perfectly that I didn't speak at all. I decided right then and there that I would learn English, no matter how difficult it seemed. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight my fear and tackle this challenge head on. The first step in my journey was setting small, achievable goals. I didn't want to pressure myself to speak fluently overnight. Instead, I started by learning 10 new words every day. I wrote them down in a notebook and practiced pronouncing them. At first it felt awkward. My mouth didn't want to make the sounds, and I felt silly repeating words like cat and dog. But I kept going, telling myself that every new word was one step closer to my goal. I also decided to watch movies and TV shows in English. At first, it was difficult. I couldn't understand most of what was being said. The actors spoke too fast, and I had to keep pausing to look up words. But I didn't give up. I started watching with subtitles, and over time, I began to pick up words and phrases. It was slow progress, but it was progress nonetheless. I even started to recognize familiar phrases and expressions that I had learned from my vocabulary lists. One of the biggest challenges I faced was speaking. Even though I knew a lot of words and phrases, I still felt nervous whenever I had to speak. I joined an online language group where we could practice speaking with each other. At first, I was terrified. The thought of speaking in front of strangers made my heart race. But the more I practiced, the more comfortable I became. I made a lot of mistakes, but I learned to laugh at myself. Every time I made a mistake, I saw it as an opportunity to learn and improve. A breakthrough moment came when I had a conversation with a native English speaker. I had been practicing for months, and I was finally ready to try speaking with someone who spoke the language fluently. It was a nerve-wracking experience. My palms were sweaty, and my mind went blank at times. But to my surprise, the conversation went better than I expected. I made a few mistakes, but the person I was speaking with was kind and patient. They didn't judge me for my mistakes. Instead, they encouraged me. That was the first time I truly felt confident speaking English. As I continued on my journey, I realized that learning English was not just about memorizing words and rules. It was about developing the confidence to use the language in real-life situations. It was about finding my voice and feeling comfortable expressing myself in a foreign language. Slowly but surely, I began to feel more comfortable in English. I also discovered the power of reading. Reading English books, even simple ones, helped me expand my vocabulary and improve my grammar. At first, I started with children's books because they were easier to understand. But over time, I challenged myself with more difficult books. I didn't always understand everything, but I didn't let that stop me. I kept reading, and with each book, my skills improved. One of the things that helped me the most was finding a mentor. I met someone online who had been learning English for years and was willing to help me. They gave me advice, shared their experiences, and provided feedback on my writing and speaking. Having someone who believed in me and supported me made all the difference. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in my struggle. My journey was not without setbacks. There were days when I felt frustrated and wanted to give up. Sometimes, I felt like I wasn't making enough progress or that my mistakes were too big to overcome. But I kept going. I reminded myself that learning a language takes time and that every mistake was a lesson. I was learning, and that was enough. As I kept pushing through my struggles, I began to realize that setbacks were a natural part of the learning process. There were times when I felt discouraged because the progress seemed too slow. I would compare myself to others, wondering why it seemed so easy for them while I was struggling. It wasn't until I took a step back and really reflected on how far I had come that I began to appreciate the journey. I had made mistakes, yes, but those mistakes were teaching me valuable lessons that would shape my growth as a language learner. One of the most significant challenges I faced was listening. It was difficult to follow conversations in English, especially when people spoke quickly. The first time I listened to a podcast in English, I could barely catch any of the words. It felt like a foreign language entirely, even though I knew the words. I realized that to improve my listening skills, I had to expose myself to the language more. I started listening to English podcasts, audiobooks, and even songs with lyrics. Gradually, I began to understand more, but it still wasn't perfect. It took months of consistent listening before I could catch most of what was being said. Even now, I occasionally struggle. But I know that every listening practice session is helping me improve. Speaking, on the other hand, was a whole different challenge. I was terrified of speaking in front of others, and this fear held me back for a long time. I would practice speaking to myself in front of the mirror, but the moment I had to speak in front of others, my confidence would crumble. I decided to overcome this fear by joining a conversation club. At first, it was daunting. I could barely string together a few sentences, and I felt embarrassed about my accent. But the people in the club were incredibly supportive. They didn't judge me for my mistakes. Instead, they encouraged me and shared their own struggles. Slowly, I became more comfortable. I started to speak more confidently and realized that nobody was perfect, but everyone was there to learn together. That was a turning point for me. One day, I had the opportunity to meet a native English speaker. I had been practicing for months, but this was my first time speaking to someone who spoke English fluently. I was nervous and my heart raced. I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. But I reminded myself that I had come this far and I couldn't let fear control me. I introduced myself, and to my surprise, the conversation went better than I expected. We talked about everything from hobbies to life in general. I stumbled over a few words, but the person I was speaking with didn't mind at all. They were patient and encouraging, which made me feel more confident. That moment made me realize that my progress wasn't about speaking perfectly, it was about communicating and connecting with others. Over time, I started to build a routine. Every day, I set aside time to practice. Whether it was reading, listening, writing, or speaking, I made sure that I was consistently working on my skills. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when I wanted to give up, but I kept going. I reminded myself that consistency was key. Little by little, I saw improvements. I could understand more of the movies I watched. I could read books in English without having to look up every word, and I could hold basic conversations with native speakers. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. One of the things that helped me the most was learning from others. I joined online forums and language groups where people shared tips, resources, and encouragement. I learned that everyone had a different way of learning, and there wasn't one right method. Some people learned by watching TV shows, while others focused on grammar. Some people preferred practicing speaking with friends, while others wrote journals. I took inspiration from others and adapted their strategies to fit my own needs. It helped me stay motivated and find new ways to improve. Another breakthrough came when I started writing in English. At first, writing felt like a huge challenge. I would sit in front of my notebook staring at the blank page, unsure of how to begin. But I pushed through. I started writing short paragraphs about my day, my thoughts, or anything that came to mind. Writing helped me improve my grammar, spelling, and sentence structure. It also gave me a chance to experiment with new vocabulary. I would look up words I didn't know and try to use them in my writing. Slowly but surely, I began to feel more confident in my ability to express myself in written English. One of the biggest changes I noticed was in my attitude. At the start of my journey, I had been afraid to make mistakes. I was embarrassed about my accent and my inability to speak perfectly. But as I progressed, I learned to embrace my mistakes. I started to see them as stepping stones toward improvement. Now, when I make a mistake, I don't feel ashamed. Instead, I see it as an opportunity to learn and grow. I realize that language learning isn't about being perfect, it's about progress. There were moments along the way when I felt like I wasn't moving fast enough. Sometimes I would look back and wonder why I wasn't fluent yet. But then I would remind myself that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time, effort, and patience. Each day I spent practicing was a step closer to my goal. I was learning, and that was enough. As the months went by, I found that I wasn't just learning English, I was becoming a different person. I had gained more confidence in myself and my abilities. I had learned to push through the challenges and not let fear hold me back. I had learned that persistence was key, and that with each small step, I was getting closer to my goal. It was no longer just about learning a language. It was about personal growth. The process of learning English had taught me to be patient with myself, to believe in my ability to improve, and to keep going even when things got tough. I had transformed not just my language skills, but my mindset. I was no longer afraid of making mistakes. I knew that mistakes were a part of the journey, and I was proud of every one of them. Looking back on my journey, I realized just how far I've come. I may not be fluent yet, but I am closer than I've ever been. I've learned so much, not just about English, but about myself. I've learned that perseverance is everything, and that even when the road seems long, every step forward counts. Most importantly, I've learned that with hard work and determination, anything is possible. So, to anyone who is struggling to learn English or any other skill, I want to say, don't give up. Keep going. It's not going to be easy, and there will be moments when you feel like you're not making progress. But I promise you, if you keep pushing forward, you will get there. Believe in yourself, and remember that every mistake is just a lesson in disguise. Keep learning, keep growing, and one day, you'll look back and realize just how far you've come. Conclusion. Thank you so much for watching this story. I hope it inspired you to believe in yourself and keep moving forward, no matter how hard things get. Remember, every small step you take brings you closer to your goal. Mistakes are not failures, they are part of the learning process. You are stronger than you think, and your journey is worth every effort. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to check out our previous videos for more motivational stories and helpful tips for learning English. Each video is made with love and care to support you on your learning journey. Your support means the world to us. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new story. Together, we can grow, learn, and achieve our dreams. Keep going, you've got this.